All right, let's talk about a name pretty much everyone knows. Frank Abagnale. You know the story, right? The teenage genius, the master imposter, the guy who made the FBI look silly.
I mean, it's just this incredible tale of adventure, right? And of course, we all saw Leonardo DiCaprio play him in Catch Me If You Can. That movie basically turned him into a modern-day folk hero.
But here's the thing. For years, there's been this other story, kind of bubbling under the surface. And it all comes down to one really powerful question. What if the story itself was his greatest lie?
Okay, so before we get into the weeds, let's just quickly run through the legend. You know, the official story that made him famous. This is the version he's built his entire life on.
So you have this immediate stark contrast. The legend, it's all about this brilliant teenager jet-setting around the world, pulling off these incredible cons between like 16 and 21. The reality though, well, public records, and we're going to dig into those, they point to something completely different. A young guy who was actually in prison for most of that time.
I mean, look at these roles. This is what the whole myth is built on. He wasn't just faking checks. No, he claimed to be a Pan Am pilot, a pediatrician in Georgia, a lawyer, even a professor. I mean, the sheer nerve of it is just wow.
And it's the specific details that really make this story larger than life. This is the stuff that feels like it was written for Hollywood.
So get this. He says he passed over 17,000 fake checks. The total? A whopping $2.5 million. And you gotta remember, we're talking about the 1960s here. That's an insane amount of money.
Then there's the pilot story. He claimed he flew for free, just by hitching rides in the cockpit, and racked up over 2 million air miles, just traveling the globe completely on Pan Am's dime. It's a fantasy, right? And that's what makes it so good. And then you've got the grand finale of his escapades, the big escape. He claims he's on a plane at JFK, it's taxiing on the runway, and he manages to sneak into the bathroom, squeeze through the toilet hatch, drop onto the tarmac, and just run. And nobody hears a thing because the engines are roaring. I mean, come on, that is straight out of a movie.
Okay, so it all sounds amazing. But here's where things start to unravel. Almost as soon as he started telling this story, journalists and researchers started digging, and they pretty quickly found that the facts, well, they just didn't add up.
So you have to ask, what if the story isn't true? Because if all those incredible adventures never really happened, then who is this guy who's been telling these tales for half a century?
And what's really important to get here is that this isn't some new theory. This isn't just internet speculation. We're talking from the very start. Journalists were finding that the official story didn't match the public record. You know, things like arrest reports, prison files, all of it told a completely different story.
And listen to what his supposed victims were saying. Back in 1978, a reporter called Pan Am to ask about this supposed $2.5 million fraud. Their response? The spokesperson had never even heard of Frank Abagnale. And his quote says it all.
See, Abagnale always painted himself as this kind of Robin Hood figure. Oh, I only stole from the big corporations, never individuals. But the records show something else entirely. His actual crimes were often small-time thefts from regular people. Real people were his victims. There's this one story of a family in Baton Rouge that took him in. They fed him, gave him a place to stay, and he repaid them by stealing their checks. That's a long way from being a charming rogue who only targets the man, you know?
Okay, now we get to the absolute core of it. The one piece of evidence that basically blows up the entire timeline he's sold us, and it's his own prison record. Remember this name, Great Meadow Prison. It's a real place, a correctional facility up in New York, and official records show that inmate number 25367, a one Frank Abagnale, spent a very significant part of his teenage years right there. So check out these dates. The whole legend is built on what he did between the ages of 16 and 21. But the official records, the state archives, they show that from the summer of 65 to the very end of 68, he was in prison. That covers his 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th birthdays. So how could you be posing as a doctor in Georgia or jet-setting across Europe as a pilot when you're actually locked up in a New York prison? It just doesn't work.
And this is where the whole thing just falls apart when you look closer. Claim, he's a pediatrician at age 18. Reality, he's inmate number 25367. Claim, he's an assistant attorney general in Louisiana. Reality, there's zero record he ever passed the bar, but there is a record of him getting arrested for theft there. The $2.5 million in checks, the actual convictions were for less than $1,500. And that epic escape from the federal prison in Atlanta? Yeah, Federal records show he was never ever there.
So, okay, if the daring impersonations and the high-flying adventures were all made up, what's left? Well, maybe, just maybe, we're left with his greatest con of all, the story itself, the one that made him a celebrity.
Now, whenever he's been confronted with these facts over the years, he's had a go-to defense. He blames his co-author. He says the writer over-dramatized and exaggerated things for the book. It's a pretty neat way to shrug off all the unbelievable parts, right?
There's just one tiny problem with that excuse. He was telling these exact same stories, the pilot, the doctor, the whole shebang, on national television years before the book ever came out. We're talking The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, The Game Show to Tell the Truth, magazine features, all in the late 70s. The stories came directly from him long before any co-author was involved.
And this might be the most telling thing he ever said. Back in 1981, a reporter was really pushing him, asking if his life story was just a big lie. And his response was, and I'm quoting here, "If you didn't do all those things, and you've made all this money, then you are in fact the world's greatest con man." It's almost like he's admitting it, you know? That the story is the con.
And that's really where this leaves us. So maybe he wasn't the master pilot or the genius doctor he claimed to be. But think about it. He sold a completely fabricated story to the entire world. He got rich, he got famous, and he built a whole career as a security expert based on lies. So, in a weird way, doesn't that make the story of Catch Me If You Can his most successful con ever? I'll let you be the judge of that.